Welcome to The Kingdom, a podcast dedicated to CCBC Essex Athletics in a land defended by Sir Ross's Knights. Now here's your host, Rocco Jeppy.
Hello Knights Nation, Rocco Jeppy here for The Kingdom podcast, and we thank you for joining us for episode numero 16. Don't ask for anything more because my Spanish is limited. We thank you for joining us. I'm Rocco Jeppy. Alongside me, as he has been now for 15 of 16 episodes, Aaron Thomas. Aaron, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks again for having me.
We have a pretty full slate today. We are, unfortunately, we are awaiting the arrival of our women's soccer team back from nationals. They were eliminated in pool play, losing to the number 2 seeded Eastern Florida State College Titans 5-0 on day one, and to Gillette out of Wyoming 4-1 on day two. Still extremely proud of this team, and looking forward to welcoming them back what looks like Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot to be proud of, and we're going to get into the particulars of the season here in a moment, but so much to be proud of, not just for fans, coaches, but the players as well. I hope when they're riding on that bus back here to the campus, I hope they have their heads held up high.
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, we follow them pretty closely on social media, and there were a couple of tearjerker tweets from a couple of sophomores last night. Captain Michaela Boyle and sophomore Tori Santoro, really get the waterworks going, and basically they were saying how thankful they were to be a part of the program and play for this team for the last 2 years, and I retweeted that with something along the lines of, this is why we do it. We do it, not for the records and the accolades and, bragging rights. We do it to hear things like that at the end of the season, at the end of the 2 years, that our student athletes are enjoying their time here.
Absolutely. I think that's why everyone does it. One of the things that I always remember my dad saying to me when I was a kid was that I never got you into sports to have you be professional. I got you into sports because sports is a metaphor for life. And this season was a tremendous metaphor for life because, we thought that the team had some talent, and we'd certainly talked about that in our season preview podcast, but I don't think either of us expected this season to happen.
No, I don't think so either. I think we were extremely optimistic. I think, we knew that this team was going to be better than last year. We didn't know it was going to be this good. There's a transition period. There is a time for growth. And I think one of the top reasons that we were so optimistic is that, when we brought on Joe Fiedler to take over the women's program last year, we knew what we were getting in him, right? Like, there's a lot of times where you'll go through a coaching interview and you'll go through the hiring phase, and you see a person on paper and you hear what they're telling you in an interview, and who doesn't tell you good stuff in an interview? I don't think I've ever been in an interview, whether it be me or whether it be as part of a search committee, where somebody has answered that question, what are your weaknesses, honestly, okay? And so it's tough to hire coaches, especially at this level, because we ask a lot of our coaches. They're basically part-time coaches with full-time expectations, and to already know what we're going to get from a coach going into things, I think was half the battle won. But yeah, I mean, you said it, to go last season from 7-9-1 to finish this season at 19-4 overall. I mean, they finished this year with more wins than the last 2 seasons combined. It's unheard of in 1 year.
Yeah, it's unheard of, like you said, but it's it's year 2 of Coach Fiedler's run. We knew it was going to be a little bit better, but more wins that you had combined from the last 2 seasons. That's a heck of a turnaround. That's the kind of stuff. If this was professional sports, there'd be a documentary about that in 20 years.
Oh my gosh, that most definitely. I mean, they come in, they win the conference for the first time since, and not a lot of people knew this, but win the conference for the first time since 2002. Okay, they win the region for the first time since 2012, and then go to the national tournament for the first time since 1995. It's been some exciting times in sports here in Essex lately. A few years ago, the Knights baseball team wins a region for the first time in 24 years. They go to the World Series 2 years later. Now the women are at nationals. I mean, we like to spend this kind of money, but we're spending a lot of money in championship banners lately.
Yeah, and we had done one of our more recent podcasts. We talked about the cross country team's success this year too. So success going around in all the sports. We know the playoffs is when you win the shiny stuff, but the regular season is where you earn the opportunity to win that shiny stuff. It's 16-1 in the regular season this year. Only loss was that first loss of the season too.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before. They lost to Monroe 15-0, but when you're without more than half of your starters, they were without 7 starters. Some things are going to happen. But they still, I think for me, they go into the district semifinals and they lose to Monroe 6-1. The end of the year, and I think I'm going to jump forward a little bit. The end of the year, 4 losses, all to ranked opponents. Their 4 losses were 2 to Monroe, number 1 in the country, defending national champion, to the number 2 ranked and tournament host, Eastern Florida State College. I can't imagine, because in the broadcast they were in a pretty tight booth, so we couldn't hear the crowd very much. But I couldn't imagine having to play that game on Monday against the host school with their fandom just right there. I mean, that would be the equivalent of us hosting, a Division II tournament next year when we start at that level, and you have all of Baltimore County being available to be there and cheer you on.
Yeah, talk about running into a buzzsaw. I mean, you got to start fast and you got to stay fast in an environment like that. And, the Knights certainly have the talent to be able to do that, but like I said, they kind of just ran into a buzzsaw. You have the environment, and then you have a really good team, so you got to win 2 games almost.
Yeah, it was tough. And then, of course, that 4th loss coming to Gillette, who is ranked number 17 in the country. The Knights will end the season as the number 12 ranked team. We'll have more to talk about this team here when we return. We're going to hit our first break. You're listening to a podcast dedicated to CCBC Essex Athletics.
Times have changed. No longer will I stay stuck in a job because college has no time for me. I have a life and kids. I will not let a limited schedule limit me. My kids will see hard work pays off.
For all the practical thinkers, the achievers, the can't wait to get started types out there, your community college is waiting. Rethink what's possible with CCBC. Visit us online at ccbcmd.edu and see what you can be.
All right, folks, thanks for hanging in there. And as always, an important message from CCBC. Remember, FAFSA, I don't think that deadline is hit yet because I just saw a tweet from CCBC the other day. Make sure you're filling out your FAFSA. This is for the 2020-21 school year, I believe. Either way, whether I'm right or wrong, make sure you fill that out. Folks, there are millions of dollars that are left on the table that the government gets to keep in the coffers and earn interest on every year because people don't fill this FAFSA information out. So make sure that you go to do that. If you don't know where to go, check out ccbcmd.edu. You can also keyword search FAFSA in your search bar and find the correct government websites to do that paperwork. We're back, of course, here on the podcast, the Kingdom Podcast. Rocco Jeffy alongside Aaron Thomas. And Aaron, we were talking right before we got into the first break about the losses on this team, and amazingly, this team did not lose 2 in a row until the district championship and the first round of the national tournament. 19-game win streak to get where they were this season.
Yeah, that's an incredible stat right there, and really kind of captures what this team was all about. They were no-nonsense team, and they knew that even after a victory, there was always more work to be done. Yeah. And if you listen to our last podcast, when we were talking to some of the players before they were headed out to the national tournament, they knew there was more work to be done there, and they were very excited to get to work. We know what the outcome was, but it wasn't like they weren't prepared for the situation.
Yeah, and expectations, I think the expectations were where they needed to be. I think it was a situation where do we want a national championship? Yeah, we won a national championship, but that wasn't the expectation. The expectation was they already, in a sense, won. Not having gone for 24 years. I mean, we've talked about it before. On the team, the only person that was alive the last time that team went was Joe Fiedler. So you're already, when you're driving down to Florida, you've already won. And I had another kind of nearly tear-jerking moment after that first game. I read a tweet from one of the players that said, "What an embarrassment!" And I just had to hit her back on Twitter, and then I texted her as well, and I said, something to the effect of, "Look, you guys are not an embarrassment. We're proud of you already. You could have, the minute you stepped off of that bus into the hotel, we were already proud of you." And I think that after yesterday, I think a lot of the student athletes are starting to get it and understand what this entire season has meant. And I told them, you guys have laid the foundation. Years from now, when we win our first national championship since, I believe it was 1994, I could be wrong, it'll be because of the foundation that you all laid this year.
I say this a lot when you're talking about professional sports, but I think it applies here as well. Only one team gets to win the championship every year, but multiple teams get an opportunity to fight for the championship every year, and that's where you want to be, and that's where they were, and they had an opportunity, and like you said, it's got to start somewhere, and They laid that first brick of the house today, or this year.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to that line from one of your favorite movies, Moneyball. You want to play in that last game. You want to be the team that's the last one standing, and in this instance, 12 teams make the tournament. Only one of those 12 teams are going to be,
really
definitely happy.
Yeah.
Like everybody, once it all settles down, you're going to be happy and proud of what you've done. But there's going to be just one team out of 12. And then you look at one team out of the top 20. And then how many Division I women's soccer programs in this country? Like, there's only one that's going to be extremely happy at the end of the season.
Absolutely. And they have, like I said before, I hope they're driving back here to the campus with their heads held high because they have a lot to be proud of. And, it's the journey that you think about at the end of the day. And we're going to talk about their journey here now headed to that national tournament.
Yeah, it was a very interesting start to the season. We always start the season with the Knights Kickoff Classic. And I think the biggest thing that Coach Fiedler brought to the team is he has that the ultimate goal, obviously, is to win a national championship. So how do you win a national championship? You don't win one by playing all these teams that are down competition. You got to play the best because when you make it to the tournament, you're playing against the best. And so they couldn't have started against anybody better than Monroe on day one. We've talked about that one ad nauseum. And then they come right back less than 24 hours later, and they get into a very aggressive, back and forth game against Harcum, in which they win 4-3 in overtime. A few days later, almost a week later rather, they go up against a Montgomery team that last year gave them some fits, and they really rendered in that game. The one thing that stood out to me that I still remember, their best player was almost irrelevant in that game, talking about the Raptors, and they took one 2-0 from the Raptors. And I think that's when the wheels started kind of turning for me, and I kind of looked at that and said, okay, we not only did we come back and win after a 15-0, I mean, let's be honest, drumming, but we came back and won a hard-fought game, and then we take care of Montgomery, who was the cream of the crop last year. I think that's when it started to, the gears started turning. We took care of Anne Arundel 5-1 on the 6th of September, which was 3 days after that. But for me, where it all started to make sense was on September 8th against Rowan College, Burlington County. I remember standing on the sidelines where I'm often at near the scores table, and sophomore and captain Michaela Boyle was subbing in, and we were just kind of chatting, and I was like, I think this is a special team. I said, in fact, I am so confident in you guys right now, I'm not going to trim my beard until you guys lose again. And they picked up that win that day to go 4-1. And I think it was maybe about 4 days before that. September 4th was the last time I trimmed my beard. And I'm not trimming it until they return home safely from nationals. So this Santa Claus thing has really gotten, to a point. But honestly, that's where it started, where I started believing that this team was very special.
They were in the middle of their fourth straight win when that happened, and little did you know that they were going to rip off 15 more wins after that.
It was insane. I'm lucky that my wife likes the lumberjack look because anybody listening out there that is married or otherwise in a serious relationship, happy wife, happy life, and it would have been an even longer season had she not been happy with that. And I know you dabbled in the beard life a little bit this year, and we're actually going to talk a little bit about that later today. But this season I think it was just, and then we really didn't have any tight ball games until the game against Howard on September 25th when we went to their place and won it 5-3. Then the big turn, I think, for the team is when they went up to New York. They had their trip in New York late September. 28th, they played Monroe Community College, and the 29th, they played Genesee. And Monroe was a ranked team, and Howard was ranked as well. Monroe was a ranked team, and not only did we beat them 3-1, we beat them 3-1 in their place. And then Monroe was actually a national tournament participant as well, just seated right below us at number 12. That New York trip, I think, is where it all clicked for the girls. They knew that they could see this thing through, and they did.
And fans at home, if you haven't checked it out already, listen to some of the podcasts we've done with some of the players on the team, and they talked about how that trip really bonded them closer as a unit, and they felt like, I don't know if they were talking about this on the field or more off the field, but they just talked about how after that trip they felt a lot closer as a team, and we talked about it before. That's why a lot of professional teams do that same thing. They schedule a road trip or a trip in the early preseason, and they do that to try and bond the team together. And that New York trip really helped for this squad.
It definitely worked. Their next most tightly contested game came October 5th when they went to, again, on the road, went to Mercer, took care of business 3-2, and then they kind of just soared right through the end of the regular season and the regional tournament, defeating Union, Frederick, and to end the regular season, and then just taking care of business in the regional tournament, outscoring Southern Maryland and Frederick by 15-0. Made it to the district tournament, which we hosted at Catonsville. We took down Sussex in that first game 2-0, and then of course the game with Monroe at 6-1, and we've talked about Eastern Florida and Gillette. The team finishes there in this season. They scored 121 goals, averaging 5.45 a game, allowing 44. And again, I put that into perspective when we take that number and we subtract away the two of the four losses, which were to Monroe. If not for Monroe, we would have allowed 23 goals. So, very good job on defense, and I think. Again, I would have loved to see how things would have gone when we had our full team to start the season, but we didn't, and it is what it is, but very impressive. I mean, to be the number, going into the national tournament, they were number 2 in the nation in goals scored. That's impressive.
Absolutely. That's a really impressive stat, and I think that was kind of the narrative of the whole season. Understandably, Kara Dietrich had one of the more impressive seasons you're going to see at any level. 52 goals in a year, second in the nation. But really, if you're around this program and if you watched them from start to finish, it was the defense and the goalkeeping that really, I'm not going to say kept them in games, because we already talked about a lot of the games they played in the regular season weren't close, but this was the defense and the goalkeeping was the anchor of the team. And I think if you talk to the midfielders and some of those forwards, they would say that a lot of their opportunities were a little easier because of their transition game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree. And we're going to get to more of those stats. Aaron kind of alluded with Kara's stat line. We're going to hit our second break of the day. You're listening to the Kingdom Podcast, a podcast dedicated to CCBC Essex Athletics.
Times have changed, and I will not stay stuck in a job because college has no time for me. I will not let a limited schedule limit me.
Rethink what's possible with CCBC. Visit us online and see what you can be.
And we're back, folks, on the Kingdom Podcast. I'm Rocco Jeppe alongside Aaron Thomas. And Aaron, we started to talk about statistics before we went into the break. No better place to start than with the leading scorer on the team and second leading scorer in the nation, Kara Dietrich.
Yeah, Kara, 52 goals. I hinted at it before we went to the break. Really an incredible performance this year. And, all that at all at any point this season. with Dietrich and her teammates. Her teammates really seemed like they enjoyed feeding her the ball, and she really seemed to just enjoy the offensive opportunity because, 52 goals, that's a lot of goals. But she also had quite a few assists as well, and quite a few hockey assists as well. They don't count as assists here in soccer, but when you're making that pass that leads to the extra pass, coaches notice that kind of stuff.
She was affectionately nicknamed by her teammates, and I may get one of these wrong, possibly both of them, but they called her Pow Pow, and they called her, what was the other one? Oh, Pom Pom. For Player of the Week, which she won for the nation, and then it was actually Athlete of the Month, but they used Player of the Month and called her Pow Pow and Pom Pom or Pow Pom as the season progressed. So
see, I was thinking as more of a comic book fan. I was thinking Pow Pow. She was hitting the ball so hard.
Staying with the stats, I think I started talking to some of my colleagues around the league when we were talking stats in October, and I said, I was like, yes, I understand she has 50 plus, or she has, at the time she had 49. She has 49 goals, and I think at the time 5 assists. I said, even though she only has 5 assists, what they don't understand is that student athletes like Danny Zachirka, Taylor West, Riley Faulkner, who are next on the scoring list in the team, they really benefited from Kara as the season progressed because so many teams would key on her. And to your point, Kara was not afraid to share the ball, and it gave those young ladies, Zachirka, West, Faulkner, Boyle, even Hales, it gave them opportunities to shoot the ball, and they took advantage of it. Danny Zachirka finished the season second on the team. 3 of her 12 goals came in the regional final against Frederick in a 5-0 win.
Yeah, and we saw pretty much their most exciting game down the stretch. Riley Faulkner was the one who had the goal. I think she had 2 goals in that game, and they were kind of, you blink and you miss those kind of goals. Yeah, no, this offense was really clicking on all cylinders. I think one of the players that really impressed me down the stretch was Taylor West. She had some struggles in the beginning of the season, but she really seemed like she found her footing down the stretch, and not just with the goal scoring. She did finish with 10 goals, but she seemed to be the player who, down the sideline, she may not get the assist for the cross, but she put the cross in that led to the assist, that led to the goal, so on and so forth.
Yeah, she had a beautiful cross, in the national tournament game against Eastern Florida, and those are the two teams that they played. They play teams where if you jump on them early, you change the entire game, and you put yourself in a position to have a fighting chance. And that was almost the case for the Knights. 4th minute of play, the Knights get on the counter, and Taylor puts she was probably about 10 yards off the left sideline. And she put a left-footed cross, and I'm not even exaggerating with this. In the 2 years she's been here, that's probably the best cross she's ever hit. She put it far post, and Danny Zachirka takes a one-timer about, was she about 8 yards away from the goalie or so? And the goalie just slid to the post, put herself in a great position to make the save. But if Danny scores that goal 4 minutes into the game, that changes the landscape of the team that you're playing that's number 2 in the nation. And the same thing happened yesterday in the game against Gillette, where the Knights had opportunities early. And again, if they score, it changes the landscape. It changes what the other team is probably going to do to defend you. That's really the makeup of soccer once you get to that level.
Yeah, and really, that's the makeup of a lot of competitive sports. There's always usually 1 or 2 plays in a game that if that play goes a different way, then the game probably goes a different way. And I'm sure that there's some fans out there of the other team and maybe saying, "Oh, that's coulda, shoulda, woulda." But when you're talking about the game as a whole, that part of the story needs to be brought up because you can't tell the story without it.
Absolutely. And moving on, another part of that story is, as we talked about a little earlier, was goalkeeper Sam Tornator. Sam, as of the start of this broadcast, they hadn't had the stats in from last night's game, but they are in now. Sam played 1,682 minutes and 8 seconds this year. The total minutes played by Knights goalkeepers was 2,077 minutes, 43 seconds. So obviously playing the bulk of it. And, when you have as many 10-0, 8-0, 7-0 wins that the Knights have, I mean, of course, Joe Fiedler is going to want to get his number one goalie out of there and reserve her for other times. But despite giving up, those 7 goals to Monroe, 6 in the district, she still ends the season with respectable 1.82 goals against average, and she finishes the season with 69 saves on the year. I think what I'm most excited about is she is a freshman goalkeeper from a very good Eastern Tech program, a local Baltimore County school, obviously. But it's not like she came to us from, some outlandish club in upstate New York where she's been working with the same club coach since she's 3 years old or something. Yeah. I'm excited to see Sam return next year with this first year under her belt. I think B.A. Jack, the Knights goalkeeper coach, does a tremendous job working with the Knights men's and women's goalkeepers. I'm already excited to see her between the pipes next year.
Absolutely. I mean, when you start all 23 start all 23 games as a goalie, that's impressive. That's really impressive. One of the biggest things you can bring to a team is durability, and she obviously had that this year. And that Eastern Tech program that you said she came from is a pretty good program, one of the better high school programs here in Baltimore County. Yeah. And it's going to be exciting to see how much she improves next year.
It is. We're gonna start to wrap up this episode, folks. But just a couple of things that we're looking forward to that I'm looking forward to, I guess I should say. For the 2020 season, Aaron, 9 of the student athletes on this year's team are freshmen. So, even if you get a portion of that back, 6 or 7 of those, that'll be 6 or 7 girls coming back for their second year that went to a national championship. They know what it takes to get there now. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, that's a great bonus to have, particularly at this level when, you're typical, you're only going to have 2 seasons. So that's a great bonus for Coach Fiedler moving forward into next year. And if you remember, fans, when we talked to Coach Fiedler when we had our season preview, he talked about how big recruiting was at this level and how much different recruiting was at the women's level. Well, he seemed to figure it out this year in year number 2, and I bet you have a better idea than I do that he's probably got a pretty strong recruiting class coming in for next year as well.
Yeah, he does, and one thing that I'll say is, and I'll keep on this for Coach Fiedler because he, until the right moment, likes to keep his recruits very close to the vest. But the team, obviously, in Florida for the national tournament, myself, one of our athletic specialists, Rebecca Planthold, and one of the assistant coaches from the men's squad were at the Baltimore County Public Schools Senior All-Star Game last night, doing some recon and talking to some of the girls, getting some contact information. And, you think when you show up and the head coach is not coming to a game like that, it may come off negatively unless you lead in with, sorry, Coach Fiedler couldn't be here tonight because he's in Florida at the national championship. So a lot of the girls' eyes opened up pretty wide once we let in with that. I was able to stay for quite some time, talk to a lot of local young ladies, and then the coaching staff was able to finish things off with Rebecca. But I'm excited for the team that he's going to have next year. And lastly with that too, another reason I'm excited is a lot of people know CCBC is a Division II athletic program except for areas that don't have Division II. So like lacrosse, we're Division I because there is no lacrosse Division II. And soccer, for so many years, we've been Division I because there's been no Division II. Next year, men's and women's soccer, men's and women's cross country will move to Division II as they start that level for the first time. And I'm very excited to see because I think while we have competed for years at the D1 level and we've competed well, it's very tough to compete against teams that are able to bring in international players, but not only bring in international players, bring them in and house them and pay for their education. So it's very tough when you don't have dorms on your campus to get those types of players. So I'm very interested and excited to see what happens when we get to Division II next year and how the competitive level kind of begins to get a little bit closer to, I don't want to say fair, but when you're taking on Monroe, who's a private school and has dorms and, has 80% of their roster, and I'm probably lowballing there, international, that's tough. That's very tough.
No, really, it's no different than regular college sports or your 4-year college sports, because you see that all the time happen there where, it's, a school just has different funds, their booster program or whatever it is. It's just different. It's a different setup. So, it's not ideal, but they're playing by a different set of rules. And this year or next year, it's going to be a little different. And that, I'm sure some people are just going to look at it on the surface and say, you're going from D1 to D2, that's a step down. If you're in the know, you realize and that that's not really the case.
Yeah, some of our, and I will not mention any names, but some of the opponents that we faced over the last few years have already started whispers that we're going D2 to duck them. We can't duck you. You still play in the same region as us, so we'll be seeing you, and we'll start the friendly trash talk next year when it comes time for those games.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Knowing Coach Fiedler, and you know him a lot better than I do, I can't imagine there's gonna be any ducking going on. He's probably still gonna want to schedule those meetings for the beginning of the season. They just won't be playing as much during conference time.
Yep. We will have, I believe next year will be the 6th annual Knights Kickoff Classic. Look for that in late August. Aaron, it's as always, it's been a pleasure to sit here and talk with you this time about this women's soccer team. Very proud of those young ladies, very proud of our coaching staff, and proud of the fact that we have, 100% of our roster being not just homegrown, but being local. It's kind of like, farm to table. Farm to table athletics here at CCBC Essex.
And it was a disappointing end of the season, but as the great Luke Cage always says, always forward, always forward.
That's exactly right. Folks, if you feel like stopping by, the Knights are on their way home. They are ETA for their return is late afternoon, early evening on Thursday. So if you want to stop by and welcome them back, get by the campus, stop by the Wellness and Athletics Center. We're going to be here between 5 and 6 awaiting their arrival. I'm sure they would love to see you. If you want to keep tabs on them and watch the happenings for now and for months to come, follow them on Twitter at Knights_WSoccer. You can follow the athletics program at CCBC Essex Sports. That's the same handle on Instagram as well. And once again, we thank you for joining the Kingdom Podcast. Always a pleasure. If you have any questions or just want to reach out to us, get on Twitter, use that hashtag the Kingdom Podcast. For my co-host, Aaron Thomas, I'm Rocco Jeppe, thanking you for sticking around with us for episode number 16. We hope you return for our next episode. So long.